Hey guys, welcome back to Weld.com. So today we're going to talk about something that's very common in our industry, whether you're a professional, a student just starting out, you're an apprentice, you're a hobbyist, doesn't matter. We're going to talk about how to read a tape measure. So the first thing I would cover day one when I was an instructor is how to read a tape measure, because the first thing I would do after we covered the syllabus, class expectations, and all that good stuff was ask how many of you know how to read a standard tape measure. And I would get a sea of hands across the classroom. Everybody knew how to read a tape measure. Or they didn't know how to read a tape measure, and they didn't want to be the only person in the classroom that didn't raise their hand. You know, they didn't want to be embarrassed. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you don't know how to read a tape measure. Many people don't know how to do it because they didn't grow up building things with their hands or have parents or friends that were in that line of work. So they just never learned how to read a tape measure. It was never a necessity to them. But now it is. Everything we do in welding is going to be revolved around measurements. So what I would do is I would give them all a handwritten test. I would pass the test out to everybody, give them 10-15 minutes to answer 10 simple questions, and then I would collect the papers. I would send them to the lab, I would grade the papers, and find out where everybody sat as far as measurement. Well, the thing is, about 95% of the students didn't know how to read a tape measure. So at that point, I knew I had to teach them how to do that. So today we're going to do just that. So this video is for you. If you don't know how to read a standard tape measure, that's exactly what we're going to discuss today, and by the end of the video, you should be able to read it. All right, so what I'd like you to do now, if you're not familiar with reading a tape measure, or you think you are, go ahead, click on the link below in the description, and we're going to provide you the same worksheet that I give to my students the first day of class. We're also going to provide you with a worksheet so you can follow along during the video so you can learn how to read a tape measure effectively. All right, so before we get into it, what I'd like you guys to do is click on the link below, take the test for yourself, post the results on Instagram, make sure to tag us in it, and we'll go ahead and send you out a sticker pack. So let's get into it. All right, so the first thing you'll notice about a tape measure is we have a hook on one end, and that hook is going to slide back and forth. No, your tape measure is not broken. It's actually compensating for the thickness of that hook. So that means if I push up against an object or I pull from an object, I'm going to get the same dimension or same measurement each time. I actually worked with a guy that center punched the backs of these rivets so that the tape measure wouldn't slide back and forth. And his measurements were always about a 1/16 of an inch off or so. Don't be that guy. Now let's talk about what's actually on the tape measure. So here we have hole numbers. Okay, everybody understands what the hole numbers are. Okay, this is going to be the actual inch. But in between there, we have what are called graduations. So each one of these lines, they're different lengths and they represent a different fractional resolution on the tape measure. So each graduation stands for something. For this video, we're going to get you down to the 1/16 of an inch. Yeah, that's pretty much what most welders are going to be working in. So each one of these tick marks are in fact 1/16 of an inch, and there are 16 spaces between 1 inch. Okay, so each tick mark represents 1/16, and there are 16 spaces. So that's all a fraction is. It's a representation of how many pieces out of that 16 we're going to be measuring to. So same thing, well actually, you know what, let's go over to the whiteboard. I'll explain things a little bit easier. Okay, so what I've done here is I've just drawn a scaled up version of the tape measure. So this is going to represent 1 inch. Obviously this is not 1 inch, it's closer to 43 and some change. So we're going to go through, I've made the tick marks the same graduations that I have on a standard tape measure, and we're going to measure in the 1/16. One thing we have to remember before we get into this is all of our fractions have to be in proper form, meaning I can't have 2/4. Okay, I can't have 8/16. Okay, these aren't going to jive. Everything has to be in a proper form, meaning I can't have an even number in my numerator on the tape measure. Okay, everything has to be an odd number when I'm dealing with my 1/16, and even in the case of 30 seconds, eighth inch, half inch, the top number always has to be odd. So if you end up with an even number in the numerator meaning the top part of the fraction, denominator is going to be the bottom part of the fraction. If I have an even numerator and an even denominator, that means I have to reduce that fraction. We'll get into that a little bit later. But that's just one rule you need to be mindful of. Keep that in the back of your head. I can't have an even number in my numerator or in the top part of that fraction. So we're going to go through. So the first tick mark is going to be 1/16. There's going to be 15 graduations and 16 equal spaces for the 1/16. Now if we move to the next mark, that's going to be 2/16. I can't have 2/16 because 2/16 is an improper fraction. I need to reduce that. How do I do that? I figure out how many times 2 goes into itself. It goes in there 1 time. 2 goes into 16 8 times. So this is actually my 1/8 mark. So you can get away for a while with actually counting all the graduations, but eventually you're going to get to the point where you remember where everything is at. Okay, so let's go ahead and we will lay out our 1/8 inch. In this form you should be able to print at the link down below and you can follow along. Use colors, I have my students use different colored pens or pencils to make these marks just so you can refer back to it from time to time until you get confident and comfortable with reading a tape measure. So the next up, let's go up here. We have 3/16. Okay, I have an odd number in the numerator, and in the denominator I have my 16th. Now going back to the 1/8 here, I have to remember that out of 1 inch, there's going to be 8/8. Okay, because if I have 8/8, that's going to equal 1. So that equals a whole number. So we can't have 8/8, we can't have 16/16, we can't have 4/4. That's all going to equal 1. So that's actually a whole inch. So as I said, there are 16 equal spaces. There's also 8 equal spaces. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So after 3/16 comes 4/16. I can't have 4/16 because once again, I have an even number in my numerator. So if I break down 4/16, how many times does 4 go into itself? 1 time. How many times does 4 go into 16? 4 times. So that's actually 1/4 of an inch. So we get to the 1/4 of an inch mark. Now again, with the 1/4 inch mark, there are 4 quarters and 1 inch. And we're just going to keep making our way down the line. You'll notice that every other one is going to be a fraction or a 16th of some sort. So the next one, I have 5/16. If I was to count again, I would have 6/16. We're going to reduce that once again. I'm falling back into an 1/8 because this would be 1/8, 2/8, but I can't have 2/8. I have to have a 1/4 because I can't have an even number in the numerator. So this one over here is going to be 3/8. Okay, we keep moving along. After any 1/8, these little short marks, all these short marks are going to be 16ths. So this is going to be a 7/16. And you can get an easy read tape measure. However, I highly recommend that you don't, because if everybody else in your shop has a standard tape measure, yours breaks or you forget it at home or you lose it. Now all of a sudden you can't read a tape measure because you've been relying on a tape measure that has all your fractional resolutions right on the tape, and you can't read your tape. So don't use easy read tape measures. Okay, so moving on down the line, 7/16. The next one is going to be 8/16. So I'm going to have to reduce that one again. 8 goes into itself 1 time. It goes into 16 twice. So that's actually going to be my 1/2 inch mark. Now we all know that there are only 2 halves in 1 inch. So we don't have to worry about this one anymore. As we progress forward, back to this graduation now. 9/16. As we move forward, the next one obviously is going to be 10/16, but I know that by the length of that line, it's not going to be 10/16. It can't be 10/16. It has to be an 1/8, right? Some sort of an 1/8. So that's going to be 5/8. So now you're starting to get the hang of it, right? So now I can read by 1/8 by reading every other graduation, right? 1/8, 2/8, but we're going to reduce that to a 1/4. 3/8, 4/8, but we're going to reduce that to a 1/2, and then 5/8, so on down the line. So once we get to 5/8, we have another 16th mark. Remember, the short ones are the 16ths. Unless we're dealing with 30 seconds, then they're going to be even smaller. Okay, so we get in, and we have an 11/16. So after 11/16, I have 12/16. But once again, I can't have an even number in the numerator. So I have to take 12/16. 12 goes into itself 1 time, but it doesn't go into 16 at all, not equally. Okay, so that's not going to work. So what I have to do is I have to find the lowest common denominator, something, the highest number that will go into both of these equally, okay, which if you're familiar with your 12s and stuff, 4 is a good place to start because 4 will go into 12 3 times, and 4 will go into 16 4 times. So that gives me 3/4 of an inch. Once again, we have a 1/4 inch representation. Okay, we're just going to keep moving down the line. We only have a couple left. We get over here to 13/16. And then 14/16. So if we have 14/16, we have to do this again. We're going to have to reduce it. Okay, now we can use 2s because I know 2 is going to go into 14 equally, and I know 2 will go into 16 equally. So 2 will go into 14 7 times, 2 will go into 16 8 times. Okay, and that's going to give me 7/8. And then our last one is just 15/16. Now the easiest way to get better at remembering a tape measure or reading a tape measure instead of counting all the little tick marks, remember the short lines are going to be 16ths if you're the fractional resolution of your tape measure, meaning it's measured in 16ths. Each small mark is going to be 16. The next size mark is going to be where all our 8s are, and then every other one after that. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8, or 1 inch. Same thing with the 1/4 inch. Okay, we get into 1/4 inch, we have a 1/2 inch, 3/4, and then 4/4 or 1 whole inch. So by remembering how many 16ths are in each one of them, say for instance with the 3/4, I have 12 16ths in here. So if I have to pull a tape on something or read it at 11/16 or make a mark at 11/16, I go over to 3/4 because I know that's 12/16, and I subtract 1. That puts me at 11/16. Same thing with the 1/2 inch. If you remember that there's 8/16 here, 9/16 is 1 to the right, and 7/16 is going to be 1 to the left. So you can start off instead of, if I have to measure out, 9/16, I don't have to count all the way down here. I can start at 8/16, and then one more is 9/16. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. If you've downloaded that little sheet and you've marked everything out kind of in colors, look at that periodically throughout the day on your lunch break, break time. If you're a student, you're waiting for your piece to cool down, you're in the middle of a test, go through and read the tape measure. I can't stress enough how important reading a tape measure is, because everything that we build in the welding industry it has to be measured. Okay, you're going to get a set of prints. It's going to have measurements on there. You're going to have to build that to the print. You can't just get it close in most cases, because sometimes you have to deal with tolerances. So if I say it has to be plus or minus a 1/16 of an inch, that's how close you have to get, when you're cutting that material out and fabbing it. The thing about making mistakes with a tape measure, it's going to compound. Okay, so if I cut a piece off at a 1/16 and it's a 1/16 heavy, or a 1/16 larger than it needs to be, and then I go to put it in position and it's a 1/16 off there, now I'm already off 1/8 of an inch, so I'm outside of my tolerances. So learning how to read a tape measure, learning how to do it accurately is very important. I highly recommend you study this if you don't know how to read a tape measure and you want to get into the welding industry. I can't stress it enough, it's so important. And a lot of people that think they can read a tape measure, they actually can't. You can't just go there and say, okay, it's 3 little marks past the big mark. No, that's not going to work. Okay, I've seen people do that. They're like, no, it's 3 little marks past the big mark. You can't read a tape measure like that, right? So go through, study, break it down. Remember, I can't have any even numbers in my numerator if I have an even number in my denominator. And that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully this helps you out along your way. All right, so if you're on Instagram and you downloaded the test, post your results on Instagram. Tag us in the comments, and we'll go ahead, we'll get with you, and we'll send you out a sticker pack. Until next time, make every well better than your last.